بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد رسول الله. أرحب بكم جميعا الليلة في هذا اللقاء الرابع في سلسلة المحاضرات الإلكترونية. We have our guest today, Dr. Gregory Watson. Dr. Watson, allow me just to talk about 1 minute in Arabic, because I want just to give some translation guidelines for the audience.
No problem.
الأخوة والأخوات، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أحييكم في هذا اللقاء اليوم. والحقيقة يعني سعداء اليوم في المجلس السعودي للجودة لإطلاق الترجمة الفورية اللي تساعدكم في حال رغبتكم في الاطلاع على الترجمة. عندكم يعني أسفل الشاشة هتلاقوا موجود البوكس هذا الانتربريتيشن موجود عندكم. مجرد الضغط عليه حيكون عندكم 3 خيارات. ممكن تختاروا Arabic. عند الضغط على Arabic حيكون عندكم الصوت المسموع أعلى اللي هو صوت المترجم أو صوت الترجمة، وحيختفي صوت السبيكر وصوتي أنا في المقدمة. إذا حابين تكتبوا صوت السبيكر أو يعني إلغاءه تماما، تقدروا تضغطوا على المؤشرين على الأحمر تحت على ميوت أوريجينال أوديو. في هذه الحالة يكون عندكم الصوت المسموع فقط هو الصوت حق المترجم، علما بأن صوت السبيكر المتحدث حيكون واطي جدا. Thank you very much. شكرا. Thank you very much. I'd like today we have a very good and excellent chance to have with us today Dr. Gregory Watson. Actually, Dr. Greg Watson, he is an expert in quality, reliability, and industrial engineering. He is the past president and honorary member of both International Academy for Quality, IAQ, and the American Society for Quality, ASQ. Dr. Watson, he was the past senior vice president and fellow of the Institute for Industrial and System Engineering at the United States. He is co-founder and honorary member for Asia Network of Industrial Engineers. Dr. Watson, actually, he was the only Westerner to receive the W. Edwards Deming Medal from the Union of Japanese Scientists in Japan. And he was actually honorary member by 20 national quality professional associations around the globe. Dr. Watson, he wrote more than 12 books, and he delivered over 600 speeches, master classes, and different papers in the quality field. We are proud that Mr. Watson is familiar with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia because he actually visited the kingdom on several occasions to address audiences on the subject of quality. Today, Dr. Watson is going to talk about how to prepare ourselves for the future of digital quality. The floor is yours, Doctor, and please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you today in the kingdom, and may Allah the All-Merciful bless this time and make it a time of learning for all. It's interesting to me how we face so many challenges. Even the way we're talking today, we wouldn't have been doing this just even a year or two ago. We would be thinking about meeting together, as I had shared with my friend Dr. Al-Amri, that would have been nice to be able to enjoy a wonderful dinner under a tent with a big pot of Arabic food in front of me. But unfortunately, we're having to live through these difficult times. And these difficult times present us several challenges. And to solve the problems of today, we must first solve our own problems within. I can't solve problems outside of myself if I haven't solved the problems within. I'd like to begin with this quotation, 2 quotations from the Quran. I was received as a gift a Quran from Dr. Al-Amri several years ago when I visited the kingdom, and I think we can take comfort for this. So on no one soul do we place a burden greater than it can bear. And in times like this, when we see so many challenges facing us, I think this is a comfort to know, because Allah intends to provide ease for you and does not intend to create hardship. So what we need to do is to be able to understand, how do we cope with this? How do we not create the hardship? What is the way before us that can lead to a future that is going to be no burden that we can not bear? And so I want to begin talking about quality as a philosophical or an ethical idea, going back to the roots of these meanings of quality. And if I go back to the very original, the first real discussions about quality were held by Aristotle. And in his metaphysics, he identified four different ways to think about quality. And he said one is the difference between real substances. So these are the quality characteristics. We compare two cars, for instance, based on certain characteristics, and we make a choice about which is superior. He also said it's the mode of the subject in motion of itself. So it's the way a subject works, or can be classified according to its value. And so we can make judgments about things. We say, this has value to me, and therefore I consider it higher quality. And he also then juxtapositioned two other ideas. He said one is the good. He called it the eudaimonia, and it's composed of all goods. It's the highest good. And what it represents is perfection in virtue or excellence, which in the Greek is called arete. And this idea of excellence is different than eudaimonia. And then it's in opposition to the bad, which is araxia. And this is inferiority, or a characteristic reasoning mode that is undesirable, as it represents a lack of self-control. And so we're going to see that there's these two positions that we have here. And interestingly enough, Dr. Noriaki Kano, when he was defining his concept, if you will, of the theory of attractive quality, he used this idea of this Aristotelian idea of goodness and the difference between badness as part of his mental model. And we'll come back to talk about that. But there's a reference here in 1976 where he actually talked about this in the Japanese Journal of the Society for Quality Control. Now, Aristotle, again, talked about this concept of excellence, arete, and he said there's a moral excellence that's a virtue. And he said if we practice it over time, it becomes a habit. And so he said excellence is one of two kinds. It's either intellectual or moral. Intellectual excellence owes its birth and growth to instruction, and so it requires time and experience. Moral excellence is a result of a habit, what we consciously do over and over again. And so we have two different ways of creating this virtue of excellence. And we form these in people by doing the right things, doing what he called the right actions. And so we see excellence is divided into excellence that's learned, that's the virtue of thought, and excellence that's moral, which is part of our character. And so the point Aristotle makes, it's not just enough to know how to be good, but we have to be good in our actions. So the right actions then are how he justifies or how he describes quality from an overall perspective. And that leaves two questions. What is the action we take? And then who decides what's right? And so these are questions that quality professionals always are dealing with. And we start seeing then there's some philosophical definitions that came after Aristotle that were building on him. So the first came by René Descartes, the Frenchman, who in his meditations on moral philosophy in the 1600s, he said there's two different ways of thinking about this idea. One is learned ideas. Those are the things we learn. That's like the knowledge that Aristotle was talking about. And innate ideas, those which come from the inside. And he said that this is like the first cause. And so this is like the prime mover, which Aristotle had talked about. The other person in the same time period was John Locke in Britain. He was a Scottish empiricist, and he defined the idea of quality in his essay on human understanding. And he says it's the power to produce ideas in people's mind. It's the quality of the subject in which this power exists. The primary quality for him is inseparable from the object. It's what that object does. Secondary quality is produced by the interaction of that object with our senses. It's how we perceive it to be. So one is dedicated to the thing in itself, and the other is dedicated to our opinion for what we think that thing is or how it applies in our particular circumstance. And the decision continued on, and these two came together, these ideas came together in the ideas of Immanuel Kant. So Immanuel Kant was what they call a German Enlightenment. And he observed that the mind doesn't work like an empty container to just process historical data, but intuition and a sense of moral duty provides order to this stream of data that we have passing through our mind. And he had four major works in his life: the critique of practical reason. And he said, pure practical reason must be cultivated and not restrained. We have to build knowledge. The critique of pure reason is transcendental things conform to sensible forms about intuitions, about things in themselves. And this is about the future. So, what will that transcendental idea, what are the ideas we bring forward to the future? And he talked about in his critique of judgment, and he talks about judgment as intersecting and understanding for how we process information, our experience, and reason how we think about that information. And he brought all of this together in his book, The Groundwork of Metaphysics of Morals. And he says the rational agent, the rational thinking person, seeks to discriminate between right and wrong and good and bad. And so we see this theme continuing throughout history now, and now we're up to almost 2,000 years of history talking about this distinction between good and bad. And if I take Kant's ideas and put them into a model, we have what he called the categorical imperative. And this is saying a rational agent acts according to what should become universal law. It should be something that we all would follow. And that's the decision process. And we build on hindsight, comes out of physics, understanding the real world. That's the practical reason. We want to build a future or a forecast, and that's based on logic. That's his critique of pure reason. And we do that by an aesthetic interpretation. What is our experience? What do we consider beauty or good? In the way we have this play between imagination, our experience, and understanding our thinking process. And Immanuel Kant said, I ought never to act except in such a way that it will also, that my own maxim should become a universal law. This sounds an awful lot about some of the principles that I read in the Quran. And we see that we should be going for goodness, right? We should be avoiding badness. That's a very sound principle we find throughout the Quran. So what we start seeing is that all of this talking, it's universal. So Shewhart, who we honor in the quality movement, came up with a pragmatic definition of quality in his 1931 book. And he says it has two aspects. He says, one is an objective reality. So that's the thinking part that Aristotle was talking about. It's what we experience, what we see. And it's not influenced by our interpretation, but it's there. It's because we can see it. And then the second is the subjective reality. And that's about our thinking, feeling, and how we experience things. And this subjective idea of quality that Shewhart relates to the goodness of something. It's we feel it's good for us. And he says that's the outcome that we put into any manufactured product or any service we develop. So we would like to create an excellent experience in people. And that's a subjective feeling that they have about quality. In 1939, Shewhart had his second book come out, Statistical Methods from the Viewpoint of Quality Control. And at the very end of that book, almost the last page, he said, hindsight, looking at the past, supplements foresight, projecting to the future. A view backward with thinking often adds materially to a view forward, which is with feeling and the experience that we want to create. And this is also aligned with the ideas of Kant and the other philosophers that we see. So we see our modern thinking about philosophy in relative to quality goes back to a long ways. It has deep roots, if you will. And so Dr. Kano came along, and he was then introducing other ideas that came from Japan. And he mentioned that Kaoru Ishikawa had an idea of backward-looking quality and forward-looking quality. Backward-looking quality is what Shewhart was talking about, this look hindsight. and it supplements the forward-looking quality where we'd like to go. And so Ishikawa said those are two distinct modes. In the first, we remove problems that have occurred in the past. We correct problems or experiences that happen to our customers. And in the second, we try to create positive value by enhancing those things that make our products or our services better than the rivals or the competitors. And Ishikawa then also went on and he said for him, the most important judge of quality is the customer. So now we have very soundly in modern quality movements, we now know who the judger is. And that judgment that's made by the customer is based on how they feel, their experience, and that supersedes, it's higher than the conceptual design of an engineer or a designer. So it's, in other words, it's more important than what we actually do internally. How does a customer perceive it? So according to Ishikawa, value is judged through the eyes of the customer in the final analysis. So it's not what we think, it's about what others who we're delivering our products and services to. And Yoshio Kondo wrote in his book about human motivation, he says that customer satisfaction is linked to human motivation. And the idea that we should have in any organization is stimulating the enthusiasm of people to engage in that activity so that people are taking part because they find goodness in the activity. We feel good about it. I feel good about seeing my old friend Ayed tonight, even if it's just briefly on a telephone screen. And so we want to understand what is this feeling of goodness we get. And Dr. Kano's ideas about quality that were embedded in his concept of the theory of attractive quality also came out of another 1984 article, which he wrote in the Japanese journals. And it's comparing two different Japanese words. So hinshitsu is a Japanese word for quality. And he says there's a fundamental type of this quality, hinshitsu, called atamare. So atamare means it's fit for function. That's what Juran called it, fitness for its intended purpose, fit for function. And this is what Kano called must be quality. So the idea behind this is if I have a pen, does it actually write with ink on the paper? That's must be quality. A pen must write with on the paper. It has to leave a mark. That's what we have the pen for. The second type of quality was called also hinshitsu, but it's miryo kuteke quality. And this is talking about the charm of quality. It's something that's worthy of attraction. It's fit for love. And so Dr. Kano tells a story about love at first sight. You just see this and it's something that you want. So you feel it. So we would call in today's modern language, we call it a hot application. So it's a killer app, I guess, or a hot product. It's something that we see and we want to have. So for the pen, it's no longer just about how it writes. It's how does it feel in your hand when you hold it? You know, does the ink actually look pleasing when you see it? And does it help me with my eyes to be able to see that? And this is what Kano called attractive quality. And so in his model, he is having these two as two different components of the system of quality that he wants to talk about. Now, Kano's model was also based on Frederick Hertzberg's hygiene motivator theory. And I've tried to put at the bottom of each of these slides, which you'll get copies of, the reference materials. If anybody wants to take this further for some sort of reference. And in Hertzberg theory, he said there's two types of motivators in life. One is hygiene. These are neutral. They never satisfy, but we have to have them. And so we want to have safety. We want to be able to have security. We'd like to be able to not have hunger. And those are not motivators. Those are basic fundamentals of life. We have to have air we breathe. We have to have water that we drink. That's the foundation of life. And he says that the other characteristic is what he called a motivator. And this is something that we design into the products because what it is something is it compels us to want to do something. So these are the things that we do because we as an individual feel good about it. And so Kano called these two things, this hygiene factor he called must be quality, and this forward-looking motivator he called attractive quality. And it's attractive because it creates this deep affection with the customer. They build then a strong reputation about having delivered that, and they build almost like a strong friendship with the customer. And that distinguishes this company because over time, people come to recognize I can count on that company to deliver this type of capability. And so, last time I was in Saudi Arabia, I stayed in a couple of hotels. One was the Four Seasons. And you know, if you go to a Four Seasons hotel or a Ritz-Carlton hotel, you know what you're going to expect. It's going to be that sort of attractive quality. It's not going to be something you would find at a lower level hotel because they're not aiming for that. They are aiming to give you a certain experience that makes you feel good in every way. And they study what makes people feel good. And so when we start talking about this metaphysics of quality, we can start defining a transcendental definition of quality. And what I mean by this is it's a definition we can apply into any area of life. And so what I've called this transcendental quality is this phrase. Its quality is the relentless pursuit of goodness. So we never give up. We keep trying to do something good. And that's going to be why we have this concept in terms of what people really want to have. And then we couple that tightly. In other words, it's not separated in time really, but at the same time we're trying to create goodness, we have a persistent avoidance of badness. So that means we have to understand both of the perspectives in terms of what we're doing. And that we need to then say, if this is what I call macro quality, and it's the highest level of what we do in life, then we have to take that definition and bring that into the existential part of life, the products and services we deliver, the processes we have about how we work. And so we can say, if I'm talking about healthcare, for instance, you said that you'll have the healthcare deputy minister come to the Saudi Quality Council. And if I talk about healthcare, I can't say that quality is never dying. I will die. And the question is, how do people treat me? So the relentless pursuit of goodness in treating someone in a healthcare situation is to treat them with dignity, to give them the best care that you can. And so they don't feel like they have been isolated and thrown away. And this is perhaps one of the biggest problems with this pandemic we have today. Because when people get into that state, they feel alone, they feel isolated. And so we have to have some way to have a persistent avoidance of badness. How do we make that part of life, the exit part? How do we make that so that it is something that is as possible as we can make it? How do we make it is the experience itself as humane as possible for that person? Now, I go to this healthcare because when I think of this transcendental definition, I'm reminded of the model from medicine. And we have this Hippocratic oath. Again, it began in the Greeks. The Romans called it primum non nocere, first do no harm. And the core principles of this are I will respect scientific gains of those who've walked before me, the scientific basis, and we always try to advance the science. I will protect the environment which sustains us. I will abstain from intentional wrongdoing and harm. And I'll practice two things. I'll either help you or do no harm. So this is the oath that professional doctors take. And it's a careful sense of goodness. So no unintended consequences from actions. And so from this viewpoint then, how should we judge goodness and badness of our outcomes or the results or the unintended consequences? So if we take a look at this, we start seeing quality is a marathon. We can't just think about, I've done it once and it's going to be there forever. The circumstances keep changing. And as we see today, we have so many things that are affecting change in life around us. And there's now not a singular challenge that we have, but there are multiple challenges. And the challenge are now multidimensional and concurrent. And they're accelerating. So that the accelerating challenge this year has also accelerated. So it's gone from just a linear rate of acceleration, now it's gone exponential. I was reading a study that McKinsey consulting company put out, and over the last few years, the acceptance of digital technology had been moving slowly forward. But since January, over December of this last year, digital technology in the last 9 months has tripled in acceptance. In other words, organizations just say we have to do something because with this pandemic, digital technology is now a way for us to learn how to cope with these situations. If I think about it, I'm now doing meeting in Zoom with you. I've done meeting in Microsoft Teams. I had Skype sessions earlier today, and I've had Google Hangouts. 4 different ways to talk on a digital mechanism that I actually had only used Skype before this year. And so we start seeing, if we look at these global megatrends, the American Society for Quality since 1994 has been doing studies. And in those studies, we start saying, what are these factors that are driving the trends in society? And if I take a look at this, it becomes such a whirlwind. Everything is totally confusing, but it's integrated. So we had globalization is important, accelerating change, the impact on the environment, shifting demographics, the aging population, healthcare. Well, if we think about it, this particular coronavirus is a healthcare situation affecting the aging population, which is now more important because of the demographics we have, and it's exacerbated or made worse by the environmental situations we have. And it's going faster and faster. And on the other side, we see some of these things like innovative technologies, virtual learning systems, privacy security, consumer awareness, global responsibility, resisting a will to change. And then even the new quality dimensions that's going to define quality in this decade, the 21st century, in a different way than it has been defined before. And so the challenge we're going to have as quality professionals is how do we get involved in all of that change? How do we take all of these different forces for change and manage this whirlwind so we can assure that we do have for all of society this persistent pursuit of goodness coupled tightly with this relentless avoidance of badness? Well, I go back to Dr. Juran. I honor him very greatly in what he had to say. And this was his comment in 1966. And he said, my gloomy prognosis is that we in the West will spend the rest of the century getting fully on top of the quality crisis. 1966. And he was in Japan in 1964 promoting his book, Breakthrough Management. And at that point in time, he was visiting companies like Komatsu and Toyota and Bridgestone. And he was actually bringing them this idea, which they turned into Hoshin Kanri. How do we do strategic change? And Juran came back to America, and executives didn't want to talk. They didn't want to understand this. And he said, even that pace will not be realized, this slow prodding pace, if we continue to try to solve basic management problems by clever exhortations, a nice turn of the phrase, or go and do quality, or by narrow techniques and just like using a singular DOE technique or a reliability engineering technique. And I take a look, and I've been a quality engineer and a reliability engineer, a software engineer, engineering manager from the Institute for Industrial Engineers. I'm a professional engineer in Europe in both systems and industrial engineering. And one of the things I see as a problem is we hold on to old ways of thinking about things much too long. And we have to figure out how will we embrace the new things. And now we have a crisis that means we have to. It's an imperative to change. And as I look back at the world and what has happened in my lifetime, I'm 72 years old. I was born just after World War II. And in the aftermath of that, we start seeing that the atomic bomb was fresh in the minds of people. 17 million people were killed in the First World War, and somewhere between 80 and 50 million, 50 and 80 million, were killed in the Second World War. Back then, smoking was advertised. It was a fashionable thing to do. Now we consider it a health problem. The Cold War and the nuclear space race were part of my youth. The UN was just formed in 1945. Decolonization occurred all over the world as 36 countries became independent and free in the world to become self-governing by 1960. Back then, they used mechanical calculators and using statistics and graphs that were drawn by hand. And there was a high reliance on mechanical ingenuity and then just having electrical motors to drive things. And that was just 75 years ago. And these things didn't exist when I was born. Television, neither black or white or color. I remember the very first black and white television that came to my neighborhood in 1952. And we didn't have electronics in cars or refrigerators. We just had the ability to make something cold or to wash something. And now we have all of these controls. Polyester, plastics, 3D printing, software, firmware, chips. Of course, we had the chips you could eat back then, but not the ones that went into computers. There were no robotics, drones, space stations, or PlayStations. No PCs, laptops, internet. The phones were connected to wires, and I could walk maybe about 1 meter, and that was about it. I was connected to the cord, and that was as mobile as I can get. There were no hybrid cars. We had internal combustion only. There were no digitized books, music, photos, movies, and so forth. Things like online banking, journalism stuff, even food delivery, none of that existed. And we start taking advanced medical diagnostics or minimally invasive surgery, where we can have a robotic surgeon do things with very fine precision without requiring long recovery periods. And certainly no big data, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and I can keep going on. So what do we see? Times have changed. We no longer use the tools of our fathers. The tools of our fathers were based on what things were available after the end of the Second World War. So if I take a look at the great quality thinkers, so Ishikawa, Juran, Feigenbaum, Crosby, and Deming, none of them had a computer. Juran made a comment when he was in his 90s. He said, "I want to die with my hands on my word processor." He had a dedicated system that was just typing words. So it was basically an electronic typewriter going into a computer that he could get something printed out of. And so none of them were actually doing any advanced data processing on a computer. They had no idea what that meant. It was foreign to them. And so many of the ideas that they formulated were in a very much analog world. They were not digital at all. And so what we have to do is we have to figure out, what do we do? So in 1993, you could buy all of that electronic gear. We thought it was wonderful. And I don't know, but it's kind of strange. As I walk around here, I see, okay, here is a personal data assistant. So I have a digital movie camera. I have a computer. I have a digital watch, a pocket pager. There's a mobile phone, a Polaroid camera, and a Sony Walkman. So 93 rather, and that's just what, 27 years ago. And then 20 years later, it all fits in your shirt pocket in a mobile phone. So there's an iPhone that has replaced all of that equipment in just 20 years. So 2003, iPhone was launched, and it had all of that capability. And so the times are significantly changing. And so we start asking ourselves, what are the digital nails and electronic hammers we need to wield in this new generation for quality in our generation that matters? In the ASQ Future Study in 1997-98, I was leading this, and I wrote a series of 3 articles. One of them was called Electronic Hammers, or Digital Nails and Electronic Hammers. And the idea was that 20 years from 1998, we would see a whole new world. And in that world, we would be able to see agent technologies, computers telling us what's happening. And as a result of that, what we would also see is we're changing our tools. We have to change our methods because the world is changing in front of us. And so the world today, well, it's no longer the 2.6 billion it was years ago. Now it's 7.6 billion. GDP has grown 7 times, and we've consumed much more energy, fertilizer, water, paper, transportation. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has grown over 400 ppm. It's close to 500 now. In the 1950s, it was around 300. We have 9 billion tons of plastic in road fills in the oceans. So fish capture was maximized in the ocean in 1996. And now there aren't enough fish left in the ocean. We have to think about farming the fish because the ocean isn't producing enough. We have 100,000 chemicals produced, and many of them, we don't even know what their effects are in terms of the toxic after effects. In the stratosphere, we see ozone happening. In the ocean, dealkalization is occurring. We're losing tropical forests, topsoils, all of these problems with pesticides and cancers and heart conditions, the effect. And in 1950, the global life expectancy for a human being was 48 years, and today it's over 80. Illiteracy, not being able to read or understand, 64% in the 1950s. It's down to 14% today. So we start seeing that there's change happening.
Dr. Watson, sorry.
Yes.
Sorry if I interrupt you. We just remain with about 20 minutes, but we want just to wait for a while just to change the interpreter, the translator.
Okay.
Can you give us just hold for 1 minute, please?
Sure. Just tell me when you want me to start again.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Muhammad.
Please make sure that you choose Arabic again. أرجو من الجميع اللي يبغى الترجمة يختار الترجمة باللغة العربية مرة أخرى. شكرا لكم. ممكن نبدأ أبو عمار.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Watson. You can go ahead again.
Okay. No problem. It's a good place to transition. So we have a crisis now. It's this coronavirus. And the question is, how will we restart society? We slowed everything down. But we've seen this acceleration of technologies happening despite the slowing down of our human side of this. So what will be the new normal? How do we restart businesses after we've had these interruptions? Now, COVID-19 is only one of the major challenges we face. The United Nations has identified 17 sustainable development goals. And when we look in there, we see that one of those is this good health and well-being. But there are many of these goals. And so the question is, how do we attack those problems as a system so we can create quality for all of humanity? And so we take a look and we see that we have to treat the world as a socio-technical system. We have new technologies coming up, and that gives us some issues around technical complexity. We have social disruptions because of COVID. And so then what is our social responsibility for being able to deal with that? We realize that because of this disruption, we have to have social innovation. So how do we have comprehensive inclusion so no one is left behind? And then we see technical innovation is coming. It's creating more disruptions, but how do we deal with technical agility? I mean, I get confused because all of these different ways of communicating, all of them have different interfaces, different ways of dealing with things. And some of them turn your mic off when you don't want it to be off, and there are all sorts of complexities dealing with this. Now, I take a look and I applaud the kingdom because you have had in place for several years now a digital transformation of Saudi Arabia. You targeted to complete this in 2022. And so then the question is, as you move forward as a nation, are you ready to take on those challenges in terms of what quality will mean in terms of the life of those people living in the kingdom? And then what will that actually imply in terms of how we as quality professionals need to work to move forward to advance quality in that digital domain? Now, when I look at this, I see there's two components. There's a social system, which is about people and the organizations we're in. And then there's a technical system, which is about the technologies we're taking and the activities by which we use them. And so these hardware and software technology things, this is driving our physical system and how we then work ourselves, how we organize ourselves to do work, and how we interact with each other. And so we have two different things. We have a design challenge. We need to move from disorder to order. And our approach for this needs to go from, if you will, both the design as an engineering side and also heuristic. How do we work together as people? So we have to move from technical complexity to a process engineering. And we have to move from social complexity to systems engineering. So the principle that we have to take on board is we have to design order by structuring the disorder. So how will we do this from a quality perspective? Well, we start seeing there's a number of technologies. Artificial intelligence, the ability of computers to perform tasks that normally just require human intelligence. Machine learning, it's an AI discipline of experiential learning where machines adapt to new situations by self-training. They learn, they teach themselves. Deep learning is a machine learning capability or discipline where the algorithms learn by taking on massive sets of data. They call that big data. And they start sorting through that to find out what are the patterns that we should use to adapt in the future. Neural networks are where we take a kernel of a process. Here's my input, process, output. That could be my organization, but it's like a synapse in the brain. I have a many-to-one input coming in from all the suppliers, all of the different things we use to figure out what's the requirements. And out of this organization, I have a one-to-many mapping of all the different places where our products and services can be used. And so this is what's called a neural network. And we can use blockchain technology as a way to say, how do we have traceability across that neural network and make sure that we do not actually lose what's important in that system, and that it doesn't get disturbed, if you will, by someone coming in to do a privacy invasion or some sort of hacking a situation. And then we impose on all of this the idea of augmented reality. So we realize we've created two worlds, a digital twin of the real world. And then the idea of augmented reality is, how do we as humans move back and forth from that artificial world, the digital world, into the real world, so we get the right composite view of what life is all about. And we see now today, research is moving all of those together in what they call neurotechnology. So we are looking forward in the future to say, how will we put all of those systems together? And there are labs at MIT and other places in the world where we actually have people walking around with brain feed helmets. And they're actually trying to figure out, how does our mind work to control these different things, and what should be the human interface with those technologies. And so if we digitize the work in quality, what can be digitized? Well, I can do process mining to take a look in the organizational resource planning, our enterprise resource planning software, and find out what's actually happening. Where do events go? And based on tracking those events in time and location, I can create a process map. Process data can be graphically automated. So we just have a constant read of historical data. Failure modes can be embedded in logic. And so we can have a system monitoring a process and saying, this is a circumstance saying we need service, and then we can deliver that remotely through diagnostic software. We see algorithms can learn how a process works and when it's on its way towards failure, so it can then correct its performance. Machine learning is how then we operate and say, okay, we've learned these conditions lead to failure. Let's then allow the system to correct so those conditions go away. And we can use rule-based logic to define problem priority. So multiple things are affecting us, and how do we actually make those choices? And then data historians capture all the data, and we can use that to figure out the traceability of systems and find out then, where is the problem coming from? And at the end, we can do something which now the many of the organizations with ISO 9000 are doing, and we start seeing that there are digital certificates that give by remote monitor. And so the quality of human life obliges our collaboration. Kaoru Ishikawa had a benediction before he died, and it was about quality for humanity. And it is his wish that quality and related activities be spread everywhere in the world, that quality all over the world be improved, that costs be lowered, productivity increased, raw materials and energy be saved, and that people all over the world be happy, and the world prosper and be peaceful. And what he's talking about is comprehensive, inclusive action that results in good quality of life for all of society. And so this is making sense, if you will, out of nonsense. We have to take all of the chaos and say, how do we reinvent ourselves as a quality community? So we have to extend the scope of quality to less developed nations. How do we help the nations of Africa, or some of the nations in Asia or South America that are poorer and have very important problems for themselves that they can't deal with? We have to move beyond manufacturing, service, and business uses. We have to create more profound knowledge of the understanding of the quality sciences and how they apply in these digital age. We have to embrace these new technologies and integrate them into our quality methods. We have to emphasize data and evidence-based decision making in what we do, so it's becoming more and more scientific.
And we have to involve all levels of the organization and all disciplines about how we approach work in this pursuit of quality. And we have to serve all quality customers, commercial, internal, and society at large. And we have to harmonize strategic improvements with our daily management system. So as we're making change, we make sure that everyone in the organization knows how it affects their life and what they should be doing to contribute to that better life for all. And we need to create a culture of mutual trust, happiness, and prosperity for all of humanity. And most important, we should do no harm to the society or to the planet.
Dr. Watson, sorry.
Yes.
We get a problem with another translator. We want just to shift to the old one. Can we just hold for a minute, please?
Certainly.
You can have you try your cup of tea.
Okay, thank you. I'll have my coffee.
Okay, coffee. Thank
We're
you.
ready. We're ready. جاهزين.
Thank you. Shabab, excuse me, please. You need just to everybody needs just to go and reselect the Arabic translator again. تختاروا نفس الترجمة مرة ثانية. Sorry, Dr. Watson. Thank you very much.
No problem. Inshallah, we haven't lost too much.
Yeah, no problem. We'll give you a bonus more 5 minutes. So we have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Well, I think we're fine. So what we need is we need to redefine quality for the future. And this basic idea, persistent pursuit of goodness coupled tightly with relentless avoidance of badness. We need to take that definition and then define it. What does that mean to Saudi Airlines? What does it mean to Aramco? What does that mean to Saudi Electric? And so forth. So each of those different industries will have a different understanding of goodness and badness. And they have to define this reality as a joint mission for that organization as appropriate to them. And when we see that means it needs to be non-discriminating, it's applying to everyone. It's egalitarian, we're looking for equal control for everybody. Inclusive, this engagement of everyone. And comprehensive, it's dealing with all aspects of society. And so the watchword for the future is we should do no harm. We should have quality in a situation where we are always doing the things that are good for people, good for the planet, and doing no harm to either one. So that's the end of my prepared comments. I saw, I think briefly a while back, that there are a number of questions. And so what I'll do is turn it back to the moderator and see, what are the questions you have? And I'll stop sharing the presentation so we can see face to face a little better.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Watson. It's really a great opportunity for myself and everybody. We enjoyed every single word you said here. And in fact, we appreciate your presence tonight. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We have a lot of questions. We need just to, I want just to give some priority for them. Let's talk about, you have talked about the big change happened in the early 90s, where a lot of big change happened 20 years ago from the way we're doing our business till now. Can you just read what is expected in the coming 20 years?
Oh, my word. It's interesting. I've been doing future studies for ASQ for 27 years. And part of my job has been to write the scenarios of the future. And I've never actually had a problem with going out 10 or 20 years. But now I have a problem going out 5 years. And here's the problem. We start seeing so much change happening so fast. And I said change that was accelerating. So to give you an idea of accelerating change, in a decade, if I'm doubling every year, it's a 22% compound annual growth. That's a 10x reduction in defects over 10 years. But that means just 22% a year. I can comprehend that. But if we're going exponential, that means that in 5 years, I'm doing 100 times that. And now it's a matter of imagination. So as I look forward in 1998, I could see that, yes, we'd have agent technologies in computers. And so now you've got agent technologies on your phone. You can talk to is it Siri, or I don't remember who. I don't use these things. Or in your house or Amazon, and these agents, they help you. They understand your patterns and your choices and what you want to do and so forth, and then they try to adapt to you. In 10 years, that will become even more prevalent. In 10 years, what we start seeing is systems. We have our mobile phones, and I remember in 1997, Compaq came out with Solnushka, can you bring me the communicator, the two communicators, both, the two ones. So I was at Nokia at the time, and I still remember the shock we went through in 1997. We had two products, or one product that came out. It was called the communicator, and the whole world was looking for convergence of technology, where we would have computers and mobile phones merging together. Most of the mobile phone industry was trying to make the phone smaller, and what Nokia did was they came out. So in 1993 they had a phone like this. This was the 2110. Okay.
Yeah.
And so then in 1997 they came out with this, which is basically the 2110 on the front, and then backed up to that was a computer keyboard.
Uh-huh.
And this scared the rest of the industry because they said Nokia is converging technology. And this product actually was done by a group of graduate students at a university in Finland as a senior's master study project. And Nokia then put it in the marketplace and said, okay, we'll have this. It became very popular. I think the movie The Saint, they featured this phone. But that product actually couldn't be mass produced in sort of the numbers. And then Nokia came out with this product. It took 3 years. It was basically a re-engineered product, but this one worked and it did everything you needed it to. And so executives all over the world started carrying this phone. And now I have this other mobile phone, which is actually more capable than this one, but it's slightly larger. So I'd like to go back to this size phone with its new capability. Okay. But this was the thing, seeing what's going to happen in the future. It's very hard to try to figure out. But one thing we will see, that we will have increased capability in healthcare. We'll start holding back on regulations about developing the different types of medicines and treatments and so forth. We'll get into microbiology. There's a new Finnish firm out there that has increasing by 70% how active pharmaceutical ingredients go into our bodies. But it's a nanotechnology thing about how you absorb medicines through your skin. And so all of these things will happen. I'm at the point where I'm afraid actually to start guessing, because I feel like more like a science fiction thing. And then I feel like I haven't gone far enough. So one thing I'm certain is it's going to be a lot of change. And probably no matter how I painted that picture of the future, I'd probably be wrong. And I'd probably be much too conservative.
So it's all about the cycle of change will be getting shorter, right?
Exactly, shorter and shorter.
Mm-hmm. And you have talked about imagination. Let's talk, just elaborate on this. I think it is somehow related to innovation, isn't it?
Yes, as a matter of fact, one of my favorite quotations came from a man you probably heard of, Albert Einstein. They said he was a smart guy, right? And he made the comment, imagination is more important than understanding. If you can imagine something, understanding is based on what we knew in the past. Imagination is what I want to become in the future. And so imagination is really a key ingredient in creating innovations. So I was giving a lecture this morning, and I made a difference between creativity, having a lot of new ideas, innovation, having new ideas that are useful, invention, taking those new useful ideas, making them practical, and then engineering, actually making them so they work at the lowest total cost. Mm-hmm. And to make all of that work, we have to have imagination.
Yeah, good. Thank you. By the way, I like something very much new, which is the industrial engineering background, because I'm an industrial engineer.
Okay.
So
God bless you. I like that too.
Thank you very much. By the way, it is also Dr. Aid is an industrial engineer also. Can you elaborate about the any commonality between the industrial engineering profession and the quality?
Yeah, I think they're going to become tighter and tighter. I mean, in industrial engineering, you learn about technologies in production. You start learning now about also algorithms, which are critical. New industrial engineers are learning the software of R as a statistical package. They're learning about Perl. They're learning about Java and all these languages that are used for programming that digital age of the future. And they have this understanding of what are the sorts of digital instruments that we can put on processes and how to integrate that data. So I see that as the critical, that and statistics also, as critical ingredients of what the future will be. So if you talk about the future of quality as a science, I'd say it's going to be based on applications of industrial engineering and statistics coming together and being made practical.
Okay, good. We have here a question from Dr. Ayman Ishra. He's asking what is the relation between motivation and quality? Could you please give us an example?
The relationship between, I missed the first word. What and quality?
Motivation and quality.
Ah,
and he
very
has
important
the
question.
same other question. Is there a relation between emotional intelligence and quality? So you can talk about them.
Okay, so emotional intelligence is this human side component, and it's very tightly coupled with motivation. The best book on motivation was written by Dr. Yoshio Kondo, Human Motivation, 1989. And in there, he talks about how you motivate people. His definition of motivation is getting people so that they are enthusiastic about what they're doing. And that's when you've motivated them. So what does that take? Well, it takes an understanding of how do I treat you as a human being? If I treat you with disrespect, I'm not motivated.
Mm-hmm.
If I say, oh, you did a stupid major in school, you're not motivated. So I have to treat people with respect. That's a fundamental. We also have to understand what's the job, what's required of us, how we're going to be measured in that job. Do I have the right tools and capability? And then the most important thing is we have to get encouragement. So this encouragement, it comes back to this cycle about this, how do we treat humans? And so for the Japanese, what we want to do is treat people so that they have a desire to improve. So that's self-motivation. And as they build that self-motivation, they get confidence. And as they get confidence, they'll start thinking about others. And pretty soon they're confident enough to work together as a team. And being able to work together, people working together, is a critical ingredient to success for all of society.
Okay. We have here Mr. Abdulaziz Muhammad Baharith is asking about if I want to read and learn about QMS, ISO, what's your favorite books, your recommendation?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't recommend you read about ISO and QMS. I believe all of that in the future will be part of a digitized system. That ISO is actually making some major mistakes in how they're trying to integrate standards and then make that now ISO, remember, ISO 9000 and QMS, it's minimum standards. In a digital world, minimum standard isn't going to make it competitive. And I think, we use ISO as a threshold to do trade in some countries. You have to have a standard to get into the country, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be having success once you get there. And business excellence doesn't either, because business excellence is based on a set of criteria that's, if you will, averaged across all industries. So if you really want to be successful, you have to understand, how will technology work in your industry? How will we define quality for us so that we can be better than the best in our industry? So if I say that the world's best company is in a hospitality business. So I had a lovely stay in a hotel there before I went to the Four Seasons. I don't remember the name of it. Maybe Ayed would. And it was absolutely wonderful. They had a personal butler. I couldn't have asked for anything nicer treatment in that hotel. It will always be a memory in my life. Okay.
Is it the Ritz-Carlton, maybe?
No, it was above the Ritz-Carlton. So, and it was above the Four Seasons. One of the crown princes, I think, owns the hotel.
Oh, okay.
But it was an absolutely outstanding experience. Now, if I take that experience, how does that relate to having a good mobile phone? And this is the problem. Every business has to define for itself, what does it mean? And so that means, as quality professionals in a business, we have to get that understanding. How do I put this together so it relates to my business, my people, so we motivate them and get them moving forward?
Okay. Here, Mr. Yusuf Bukhari is saying, how can we transfer the company to agile from your experience. And thanks for your informative presentation.
Thank you. So Agile is an interesting technology. It basically came out of software. And if we think about how software developed, it used to be very sequential. So we had a hardware product, we got the hardware right, then we put the software at the end. And that was a failure. That didn't work. That was in the 1970s. Then we started what was called concurrent engineering, developing them both so they're being done in parallel. And that didn't work. And then we realized that we have to then break it into smaller pieces. And so Agile is actually a part of this, more or less like a lean type of application to software development. So we work in short periods of time, always getting back to the customer and say, is this right? Is this right? Do we keep getting it? And so by making those short periods, we actually advance the program. Now, that's actually based on a lot of principles that we find in the Toyota production system about how you make change in a world hardware type system for production quality, and it's software quality. It's also how we feel our way in technology transformations. So I don't know, I mean, I was being very agile for learning all this new technology. I didn't really want to. I'd said years ago, I'm going to give up on technology. I have a computer I'm happy with. I don't want to have to learn anything. And now all of a sudden I have to. And so I'm learning in an agile way. Okay, this week I do Zoom. So I learned what Zoom is. Somebody's saying, we have Google Hangouts. We have to use that. And I said, I don't have Google. I don't want Google. I don't like the way Google works on my computer. And so, but I can actually get around that now and get into the Google Hangouts and participate. Now I know how to do that. Now we find, okay, the next thing is a new type of product. And we'll start seeing those products will come fast and furious. And we have to create an agile mindset within ourselves. And this is going to be a part of quality. Can we change rapidly to deal with all of those different changes? So I believe that the agile mindset, this ability to cope with technology change, will become a core part of quality thinking in the future.
I like what you're saying, agile mindset. I like it. Thank you. Mrs. Rania Maghrabi asking, how can we learn more about quality in education?
Well, it's not in a book.
Especially, she's saying, especially we're talking about now learning from long distance, you know.
Yeah, distance learning is something I've been very engaged in my whole life. So I have 3 master's degrees I got by distance learning, all of them different models. My PhD, all of my work was distance learning, and even teaching classes via distance learning with a system called Blackboard. And so as I take a look at it, distance learning is becoming a more dominant mode. You can take a degree from Harvard now by distance learning. You can get a master's in industrial engineering from Purdue, a very good school, by distance learning. You can take courses in advanced analytics and so forth. So what's happening is now more and more distance learning is becoming a dominant mode for education. And I think these massive online courses, what they call MOOCs, you know, are becoming a more and more dominant world. I work with a bunch of young students. So I have about 1,000 students who are at their master's level in school. So they're all under 25. And it's amazing to me how they start building their credentials up based on these different certifications that they can get from these online learning approaches. And I think as we start seeing that, that will become the new normal. It's something that is affordable to everybody. I don't have to leave my home or my family to do those sorts of things. And so this is actually, I think, going to be the real challenge of the future. How we learn, I think it's experiential learning. I think we have to go through that process, and actually we learn by doing in this case. And this goes back to, if she's an educator, the philosophy of John Dewey, who actually created this idea of pragmatism in education. And he said that the experience of education is what you're doing, and that experience is accelerated by education. So we have to have education that engages us in the actual work.
Okay.
I think this is a challenge. I just created a course on Udemy, okay? And it's to teach quality managers what they need to know about how to teach quality their executives. So I don't want to teach the course myself, but I want to teach the quality professionals. Say, here is a series of lectures. Here's a series of workshops that you have, some reference papers and videos, and you can go and actually learn about those things. And then at the end of the day, you did it with your team, and you're engaged together. And I think that's really the model of education that we need to bring forward. It's to transfer to the people in the organization the necessary knowledge, skills, and experiences so they can do it themselves.
Excellent. We have here Professor Hani Al-Amri saying Grossbiz was consistently saying the performance standard is zero defect. Dr. Hani is saying, please, I need your comment on this.
First of all, we're human beings. Has anybody not made a mistake?
Sure.
I can count to some major mistakes I've made in my life. I'm not going to confess them now. That's for a different type of meeting. But what we start seeing is we learn from mistakes. The best high-tech companies force mistakes into existence so they can learn. Mm-hmm. And if you say we're always going to have zero defects, for instance, or this Six Sigma quality, I said, no, I don't even teach Six Sigma using the Six Sigma metric anymore. Because what I want is I want to get mistakes on the table. I want to see them so we can cope with them. And it's a learning opportunity. In Japan, they have a saying that a mistake is like a piece of gold. Mm-hmm. And if your system doesn't have many mistakes, every time you have a mistake, you need to learn from it because it's going to teach you something about how you make your process better. And so, the model of Lexus, very excellent car. I've had 3 of them in my lifetime. I love the car. And the motto in the production is the relentless pursuit of perfection. Not that they get there, but they keep going after it. And so this definition of quality, that relentless pursuit of goodness, that's where that came from in my mind, was we have to keep giving up. We can't give up on trying to get there. But the thing that's going to happen is we will have new technologies and things happening that will then create totally different ways that we'll see in the future.
Okay, good. If you allow me, Dr. Watson, I will just refer to the slide showing now. It's all about how people, they can get their certificate. So please, you can just email the receipt from the bank receipt to the email shown there. And here we go. That's it. I think most of the people here get familiar with this process. Thank you very much. We have a question here. Always, we have a debate, Dr. Watson, about the ISO from one perspective and the FKM and the quality award model from other perspective. What do you think, from your opinion, what is the difference between both of them?
Well, ISO is remember, it's about minimum quality. We have to have something better than that. That doesn't make you competitive. EFQM and any excellence model is about aspiration. No company's ever gotten 1,000 points. The highest company was actually Nokia Mobile Phones when they received the award, and they were graded in consensus 840 to 860 points. And you can win the award with 700 points. So that's like saying, okay, I'm just right a little bit more than half the time. So what is it really about? Well, the excellence criteria is a blending of models for many different types of businesses. So roughly they have it now adapted to education, healthcare, manufacturing, so forth. But if you take a look with it, manufacturing, it's very different if I'm manufacturing electricity at Saudi Electric or I'm at Aramco putting petroleum out. 2 very different ways of thinking about quality.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the problems with many of those awards. They have oversimplified everything, and they don't actually tell you what you need to do. So ISO doesn't tell you what practices you must have. It's actually silent on that. And if you go to lead assessor training, it tells you that you can't actually make recommendations. You must use this tool because that's not required. The same with the excellence criteria. It doesn't tell you here's the benchmark or here's what you have to do. And so if we're putting together a quality system, if I'm advising a quality manager, I say, take a look at both of those. And what you need with the executive team is they have to create the aspiration for your company. So this is a good checklist to get them to think about opportunities for improvement. And they have to take a look at the reality of the Gemba, which is what's happening in the workplace. And then they have to define a series of improvement projects that step by step, they make those improvements. And those can be done using Six Sigma methodology or some related to that, a structured improvement methodology that says, okay, let's take this project and that project leads, and we have a sequence of projects that takes us from this lower level to the upper level. And if management is directing them so they're aligned with their strategy, that's actually what the Japanese call Hoshin Kanri. And so we can start seeing it's a customized system for the future. And I don't think that EFQM is an answer, or Baldrige is an answer, or ISO is an answer. I think we have to custom tailor that answer for each business. So if I was asked to go to Aramco, that would not be the same product that I would be helping them at Saudi Electric with. You know, each of them needs to define their own process in their own way, so it makes sense for their business model. And actually, in the very first year of Baldrige, 5 pages of the application had to be written about how do you translate these criteria into your business model at the front end. I don't know if that is still a requirement or not, but I seem to remember it's pretty much not as intensive as it used to be.
Thank you. We have here Abdulaziz Al-Huemil is asking about the human side of quality. I just briefed his question. It's a little bit lengthy, but it is in summary, the human side of quality. What do you think about this?
It's very important. And I think it's going to be growing in importance because technology is kind of cold. Okay, so it's cold, logical, whatever. And we as humans, we like to talk with each other. We want to go have dinner together. We want to have this social interaction. And I think one of the hardest things that people are going through is this isolation in the workforce. You know, we've moved things forward very, very fast in many companies in the last 9 months since we've been suffering with the pandemic. But what we've missed is the meetings between the meetings, if you will. It's the being social. It's being able to talk to people about informal things where we have some idea of a creative idea coming up. It wasn't on the agenda. So how do we actually deal with that? So I have a young boy driving me to give a lecture today. And on the way, we talked about 3 or 4 things that were not on our agenda, but they were fun. And so we started talking about artificial intelligence and how we do certain types of applications with this and so forth. And that was not what I was planning to do. If I was just by myself in a taxi, I would just sit there and be quiet and think. So it's having that human interaction is something we missed. And this is something we have to figure out. How do we put that back in this automated world of the meeting management process? And I think that's a real challenge.
There is a question here saying, for a company wants just to adopt the quality now, is it too late now? And if it is not too late, how they can adopt the quality?
Well, I'd have to answer that in the context of a particular company. So if they have a reasonable cash flow, if they're profitable, it's never too late. Okay. If they have crisis after crisis happening, it may be too late. And so this is where we have to have this objective looking at ourselves. And I think if we think about a Japanese process has 2 processes. One is standardized do check act, the daily management system, and then plan do check act, which is where we change the daily management system. And the step where they cross over is the check function. And that's where we have to reflect. What is it that we need to do? What's going to be this different thing? And so that's really the challenge is what we have to get management into that reflective mode where they start thinking about what it is that we should be doing for the future.
Good. Let's have, when I see Dr. Muhammad is putting this slide, this means this is the end of the session, you know? So I get the point, Dr. Muhammad, thank you very much. But let's have the last question for Dr. Watson. From your experience, what is your advice to Saudi young quality managers?
Well, my advice to any quality manager is, number one, we need to learn what does quality mean for our organization. And once we learn that, we have to take a look at all of these tools for the future and say, am I prepared to be the person needed to lead that particular dimension? Where are my weaknesses? What do I need? And there's 2 types of things to look at. Number one, it's the technical side. You don't have to be the chief technologist, but you do have to understand how the technologies come together relative to your organization. And on the human side, it's this question we were talking about, the humanized society. How do I get the people so they want to collaborate? So I'm encouraging them and giving them this feeling that this is a good thing. And when we merge those 2 together, that's what the quality professional of the future, I believe, has to have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Watson. It is amazing. I really liked it.
My pleasure. Glad to be able to do this, Salim.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Dr. Aid Al-Amri, the chairman of Saudi Quality Council, and all my colleagues in the executive committee, would like just to thank you very much for this informative and valuable information you shared with us tonight.
It's been my pleasure. Inshallah, we'll do this again sometime.
Thank you. Last announcement, it will be in Arabic because it's talking about our next event. If you allow me, Dr. Watson.
No problem.
اخواني واخواتي عندنا الاسبوع الوطني للجوده وهو احد مبادرات السعودي كواليتي كونسل حيكون ان شاء الله في من 7 ل 13 نوفمبر. We're announcing our next event for the Saudi Quality Council, which is going to be number 13 this year. So we have started this event since about 13 years. This year is so special. It will consist of contain a lot of programs starting from different lectures, محاضرات وعندنا مسابقة وعندنا نشرات إلكترونية يومية وندوة اليوم العالمي للجودة. Don't miss it, okay? And we're gonna have another announcement for the ASQ because we have Dr. Watson was the past of president of American Society for Quality. So recently, about a year ago, we have formulated a chapter here for Saudi Arabia, which is ASQ Saudi Arabia section. Gonna have tomorrow, I think tomorrow, we're gonna have a speaker from the Ministry of Health talking about the impact of quality for fighting coronavirus. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Watson. It's a great pleasure meeting you personally. And thank you very much. That's it.
Okay, thank you. My pleasure too.
Thank you.
Okay, good night to everyone.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.